Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into a part of Greek mythology that's somehow both thrilling and a little bit dull. Exactly the balance you need when you're trying to drift off. This is the entire story of Ares, the god of war, rage, and awkward family reunions. You're going to walk through battlefields soaked in legend, peek into Olympian gossip that would make any reality show blush, and find out why even the gods eventually get tired of their own drama. You probably won't survive this one. Emotionally, at least. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand in a dim forge hidden somewhere beneath Olympus. Maybe real, maybe not. Sparks drift lazily through the air, landing on your bare arms like warm dust. The smell of bronze and smoke fills your nose, and you can hear rhythmic hammering. Clang, clang, clang. That's Ares. Yes, that Ares. The god of war, anger, and restless energy that no one really invited to family dinners. He's alone, sleeves rolled up, sweat shining under the emberlight as he hammers a dented shield back into shape. You expect shouting, thunder, maybe dramatic background music, but it's oddly quiet here. Just Ares and the steady heartbeat of his forge. You realize something strange. War isn't chaos to him. It's routine. It's Tuesday. Historians still argue whether Ares was actually a craftsman of his own weapons, or if that was purely Hephaestus's domain. But this image feels right. You can imagine him sneaking into his brother's workshop when no one's looking, pretending he knows what he's doing. It's not about skill, it's about control. He hammers to keep from unraveling. There's a sort of tragic boredom in his movements. He doesn't fight because he loves death. He fights because it's the only time people pay attention to him. Zeus ignores him, Athena belittles him, and mortals both worship and curse him. That kind of relationship messes with a god's head. Ares lifts the hammer, eyes glowing faintly red like a dying coal. The weapon he's working on isn't just metal, it's mood. It's that gnawing frustration you feel when your phone won't load or when you lose an argument in your head 3 hours later. Every god represents something inside you, and Ares, he's that small, dangerous spark that mutters, "Fine, let's fight then." The forge hums, and in that humming you hear stories forming, wars that haven't happened yet, kingdoms that will rise and fall because someone somewhere felt insulted at the wrong time. Ares doesn't create peace or destruction. He creates momentum. You wander closer, and he doesn't look up. Maybe he doesn't even see you. Or maybe he's used to mortals, drifting through his dreams like this. Around him lie broken swords, cracked helmets, and fragments of what could have been victories. You pick one up, cold, heavy, dented. It feels like holding regret. Funny thing about war, you imagine him saying in that gravelly, disinterested tone, "It never ends. It just changes names." And you believe him. The room flickers brighter for a second, revealing murals on the walls, scenes of chaos, shouting soldiers, blood-streaked horses, and somewhere, the faint outline of a child god watching from the edge. That's where it began. He wasn't born in this forge. He built it later, maybe as an escape, maybe as punishment. But every clang of the hammer is like an echo from the day Hera decided she was done being ignored. You'll get there soon enough. But right now, you're still in the present, watching a god who doesn't know what to do with himself when the world isn't burning. There's a rumor, well, a fringe tidbit, as scholars like to say, that ancient Greeks believed the sound of thunder during summer storms was actually Ares hammering in the clouds. It makes a weird kind of sense. Zeus throws the lightning. Ares finishes the job. You think of that next time a storm rolls through your window and you hear distant rumbles. Maybe it's not thunder. Maybe it's a bored god trying to make sense of eternity. He sets down the hammer, and for a brief moment, silence takes over. The embers die down until only one red eye of heat remains glowing in the coals. You notice his armor nearby, blackened, cracked, covered in old scratches. No god polishes it anymore. Maybe that's the point. Glory fades, and Ares doesn't mind. He likes the scars. You realize something else. There's no blood here. Despite all his reputation, Aries' private space is clean, methodical, even lonely. He doesn't crave carnage right now. He craves purpose. The difference is subtle, like the moment between inhaling and exhaling. A single raven caws outside, an omen, maybe, or just dinner. Aries glances at it, then at you, as though sensing a witness. For the first time, you catch the faintest curve of a smile, sarcastic, self-aware, like he knows exactly how the poets will twist the scene later. The god of war, found alone in his forge, hammering his sorrows. He probably hates that narrative already, and yet it fits, because here in the half-light, you don't see a monster. You see an ancient being trapped in his own nature, a creature who can't rest because rest feels like surrender. You see someone who could have been a hero if he'd learned to stop swinging. The forge hums one last time. You feel the heat recede as if the story itself exhales, waiting for you to follow deeper. The coals cool, the metal hardens, and the war god straightens his back, staring at the weapons like old friends he can't quite part with. Outside, Olympus still sparkles, perfect, untouched, pretending not to hear the steady clang echoing beneath. But you hear it, and you know now that every god has a workshop where they hide their fears. For Aries, this is his. And tonight, you've stepped into it. You blink, and the forge around you dissolves into swirling clouds of gold and ash. The air smells sharper now, ozone and fresh stone, as though Olympus itself has just been born. A soft rumble passes through the clouds beneath your feet, and you realize this is the start of Ares' story. Long before the hammer, long before the battlefield, a cry echoes across the heavens. Hera, queen of the gods, cradles a newborn wrapped in red light. She's furious, exhausted, and doing her best to pretend she isn't both. Zeus, her husband, if that's still the right word, stands nearby, already distracted by whatever shiny mortal has caught his eye this century. You can practically hear the celestial eye roll from Hera. The myths don't agree on how Ares came to be. Some say Zeus fathered him in the usual thunderous way. Others whisper that Hera, in a fit of jealousy over Zeus's latest loved child, created Ares on her own. No father, just divine spite and determination. Historians still argue whether that version was meant as symbolism or scandal, but the image sticks, a god born not of love, but of fury. You hover beside her unseen, as she lifts the baby toward the sky. His eyes glow faintly, flickers of crimson lightning darting beneath his tiny eyelids. Even as an infant, Ares doesn't coo or giggle, he growls. The gods who come to coo over him step back politely after the first snarl. Hera sighs, the sound heavy enough to sink a mountain. You can almost read her thoughts. Why couldn't he have been charming like Apollo or clever like Hermes? Instead, she's holding something raw, volatile, and loud. It's a weird start for a god destined to become a symbol of power. You'd think a war deity would burst onto the scene fully armored, shouting heroic nonsense. But here he is, just a cranky baby, with a surprisingly good right hook. You float through his early days on Olympus, watching him grow in bursts of light and tantrums. The other gods avoid babysitting. Once, Artemis tries to play peekaboo and ends up with a black eye. Even baby Ares fights dirty. Zeus, meanwhile, remains, let's call it, uninvolved. Every time Hera brings up parenting, he changes the subject to weather management. There's a reason storms often follow marital arguments on Olympus. Still, Hera is determined to make something of this son. She sees in him the potential to balance her own pain. If he can't be loved, at least he can be feared. She surrounds him with tutors, stern immortals who teach battle strategy, discipline, and posture. You'd think posture wouldn't matter to a god, but try slouching in front of Hera and see how long you last. You watch Ares practice spear throwing in the courtyard of Olympus, still barely older than a mortal teen. His aim is decent. His temper is catastrophic. The first time he misses a target, he doesn't just sulk. He rips up the training field. Lightning cracks above him, echoing his mood. He doesn't understand yet that being a god means eternity, and eternity means patience. A quirky tidbit scholars love to mention. In some obscure fragments of myth, baby Ares was supposedly raised for a time by Priapus, the rustic fertility god who, frankly, is the last person you'd expect to teach restraint. Imagine divine daycare chaos, with Ares breaking the furniture and Priapus just laughing, calling it spirit. Still, Hera's son grows fast. His muscles develop like coiled rope, his voice deepens, and his eyes always seem to be searching for something. Maybe approval, maybe an enemy. You can't help but feel a bit sorry for him. Imagine being designed for battle in a place that doesn't have wars. Olympus is peaceful, sterile, even boring. No wonder the kid keeps poking at clouds just to see what happens. When Ares reaches maturity, the air around him hums differently. The gods notice. Even Zeus, lounging on his golden throne, glances over from time to time. He's proud in the distant way a CEO might be proud of an employee he's never actually met. But something's missing. Ares has power, but no purpose. And that's dangerous. The other gods, especially Athena, already sense it. You can almost picture her, polishing her armor, shaking her head with that annoying calm confidence. Raw strength, she'd probably say. Without reason, is just noise. She's right, and Ares hates that she's right. One day, while sparring with phantom enemies in a marble courtyard, he shatters a column clean in two. The sound rings through Olympus, sharp as a war cry. Hera appears instantly, looking proud and terrified. She wants him strong, but not too strong. After all, even gods can become liabilities. You notice something subtle in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or recognition. She made Ares out of rage, and now she's seeing what rage looks like when it learns to walk. Somewhere far below, on the mortal world, the first tribes begin to fight over land and water. The smell of blood drifts upward, faint but distinct. Ares tilts his head, curious. It's like hearing your favorite song for the first time. The connection is instant. For the first time, he smiles. Not a pleasant smile, a sharp one, like lightning cutting through night. You realize that his nature is awakening. He was never meant to sit quietly in Olympus halls. He's gravity toward conflict, the pulse that makes men shout, charge, instead of wait. But even that has a melancholy edge. Imagine being made for something that hurts others, just so you can feel alive. The gods around him call it destiny. You might call it tragedy. Ares stretches his arms, looks down at the world flickering beneath the clouds, and whispers a promise you barely catch. Something about glory, noise, and fire. You get the sense he'll keep it. Far above, Zeus yawns and tells Hera not to worry. He'll grow out of it. Spoiler, he won't. The forge from before flickers in your memory, and you realize how all of this leads back there. Ares was born from jealousy, molded by neglect, and trained by no one who ever truly loved him. No wonder his hammer hits so hard. A warm wind passes, and Olympus fades again. You're left floating in the afterimage of a god's first heartbeat, a sound equal parts thunder and crying. You drift now through the wide marble corridors of Olympus, the clouds outside tinged with gold and violet. Time here doesn't move in hours or days. It just hums softly, like the pause between thunder and rain. You follow young Ares as he wanders those endless halls, barefoot and restless, searching for someone who might actually look him in the eye. The god's laughter echoes, faintly through the chambers, but it's never meant for him. Up ahead, you catch glimpses of Hermes zipping past, delivering gossip to whoever will listen. Apollo strums his lyre, basking in compliments. Even Dionysus, who technically shouldn't be here yet, is already throwing parties in rooms that don't belong to him. Ares walks by, invisible in plain sight. You can sense the loneliness in the way he moves, stiff, defensive, like every step has to justify his existence. There's no Athena around today, no sparring match to distract him, no mother hovering with advice. It's just Ares and the sound of his own footsteps, echoing in a palace built for gods who prefer prettier company. He passes a reflecting pool, its surface rippling with light. For a second, you see his face there, not fierce or divine, just young and uncertain. His eyes dart to the side, expecting someone behind him, but there's no one. You realize this is a god who has never learned how to be still. Even when he's standing, his muscles twitch like they're waiting for a fight that never comes. Historians still argue whether Ares ever had true friends among the gods. Some stories mention minor spirits of fear and panic, Phobos and Deimos, his twin sons who later became his constant companions. But that comes later. For now, he's just a kid brother everyone keeps at arm's length, because he breaks things when he tries to help. You wander with him past Zeus's throne room. The door is cracked open, and voices drift out, booming, commanding, self-important. Zeus is in one of his leadership moods, probably making speeches no one asked for. Ares hesitates. He wants to enter, wants to belong in that circle of lightning and law, but he knows how it ends. The last time he interrupted, Zeus told him to go play with the mortals. You can imagine the humiliation burning in his chest like forge embers. He turns away, muttering something under his breath that sounds suspiciously like an ancient curse word. It's strange. Olympus is technically paradise, but to Ares it feels like a prison with excellent landscaping. The clouds shift constantly, painting the sky in every shade of peace. That's the problem. There's too much peace here. It makes him itch. You follow him as he slips down a side stairway, one of those shimmering paths that lead toward the mortal world. He peers through the mist below, watching tribes of humans gather around small fires. They argue, build, fall in love, fight, and make up again, all within the span of a single divine sigh. Ares leans closer, fascinated. Here is something alive, something messy, something loud. A quirky tidbit for you. In some early cults, Ares wasn't worshipped as a destroyer, but as a protector of community boundaries. His job was to stand at the edges of villages, guarding them from chaos. The irony, of course, is that the guardian of order eventually became the god of disorder itself. The boundary blurred the moment he stepped over it. You can almost hear the first heartbeat of battle forming below. Mortals, armed with wooden spears and confusion, shout across a field. Ares' eyes light up. He doesn't understand love or music or poetry, but this tension, makes sense. See them, he whispers to no one. They feel. The scene blurs for a moment, and you're back in Olympus Gardens, quiet, still, painfully beautiful. Aphrodite drifts by, radiant as sunrise, trailing the faint scent of roses and danger. She doesn't even glance his way, though his gaze follows her like a compass lost in perfume. You see the faintest flush in his face, the confusion of a young god learning that desire and rage are cousins. Ares clenches his fists. Every emotion hits him like a physical blow. Anger, jealousy, pride. They don't pass through him, they crash. You realize that's the curse of being the embodiment of something. You don't just feel emotions, you are them. You trail behind him as he climbs toward his chamber. Inside, the walls are bare except for a few discarded weapons. There's no art, no luxury, just bronze and silence. On a low table rests a helmet, unpolished, waiting. He picks it up, turning it slowly in his hands. The metal catches the firelight and paints his face in red. For a heartbeat, he looks older, like the Ares you'll meet later, the one the poets warn you about. But right now, he's just a boy pretending to be a god. You sit in the corner of the room, unseen, as he talks to himself under his breath. He's practicing imaginary arguments, speeches, declarations. I am Ares, son of Hera, born of thunder and storm, he mutters, pacing. Then quieter, and yet no one listens. You almost want to answer, but this isn't your story to fix. Outside, a light drizzle begins. The gods call it the tears of Olympus, but you suspect it's just the sky's way of covering awkward silences. Somewhere, Zeus and Hera are arguing again, and the rumble travels through the marble floors like a pulse. Ares pauses to listen, not out of fear, but out of recognition. He's hearing the language he was born from, conflict. That's when something in him hardens. He picks up the helmet again, this time placing it on his head. It's slightly too big, but he doesn't care. The visor lowers with a soft metallic sigh, and in that instant, the lonely boy becomes something else, something focused, almost serene. He may not be welcome at Olympus feasts, but down there, in the world of mortals, there's a place waiting for him. He steps to the edge of the clouds and looks down once more. The fires below flicker brighter, as if sensing him. Maybe they do. For the first time, he doesn't feel lonely. He feels inevitable. You open your eyes to a horizon of copper light. The clouds beneath you part to reveal a new image of Aries, older now, taller, his shoulders squared by endless training. You can feel it immediately. This is the stage of lessons, drills, and the kind of strict divine mentorship that could make anyone resent their immortality. The training grounds of Olympus stretch wide across the high air, flat plains of cloud packed dense enough to bear an army. Marble targets shimmer in the distance, shaped like monsters from future myths. Rows of divine weapons glint on racks, each humming faintly with life. And there, at the center of it all, stands Athena. She's calm, perfectly balanced, her armor polished enough to blind a mortal at 50 paces. Ares faces her, spear in hand, breathing heavily, his curls damp with sweat. This is their 10th sparring match this morning. You already know how the first 9 ended. Focus, Athena says lightly, stepping forward with infuriating ease. Her voice sounds like logic itself, measured, patient, and a little smug. Ares lunges, faster this time, but she sidesteps with such grace it looks like choreography. The butt of her spear taps his chest once, twice, and then she's behind him. He growls, whirls around, and charges again. The air rings with metal. For a moment, it looks like he might land a hit, but Athena's shield flicks up, redirecting his strike so that his own spear spins out of his grip. It clatters across the floor, and Ares ends up flat on his back, staring at the perfect blue above. You can almost hear Zeus sigh from some balcony above. "My children," he probably mutters. "Why can't they ever play nice?" Historians still argue whether these training duels between Ares and Athena were symbolic, brute force versus wisdom, or literal, part of the god's strange family dynamic. Either way, the result is the same. Athena always wins, and Ares always swears he'll never lose again. Athena offers him a hand, but he ignores it, pushing himself up with a glare sharp enough to cut marble. "You think too much," he grumbles. "And you don't think enough," she replies, dusting invisible dirt from her armor. "War isn't noise, brother. It's rhythm." He hates when she calls him brother. It sounds like an insult wrapped in politeness. "War is about strength," he says, flexing just to prove the point. She tilts her head, eyes soft with something like pity. "Then you'll always lose to someone smarter." You swear you hear a faint cosmic ouch. Even Apollo, lounging nearby and pretending to tune his lyre, winces for him. Ares storms off, muttering under his breath. His footsteps echo across the training field, and the clouds underfoot rumble slightly, mirroring his frustration. You trail after him, catching bits of his grumbling. Something about strategy being for cowards, something about Athena cheating. But deep down, he knows she's right. That evening, he sits alone near the edge of the field, tossing a bronze coin into the air. Over and over, the rhythmic flick and catch fills the silence. You notice how carefully he moves now, trying to control the restless energy in his body. He's learning, in his own way, that anger can be tempered. It just takes centuries. A quirky tidbit surfaces from the old myths, apparently. Ares' first instructor wasn't Athena or any Olympian at all, but a mortal king named Enemaus, famous for his war horses and his very unfortunate luck with chariot races. Some ancient poets believed the young god disguised himself to train among humans, just to feel what real struggle was like. Imagine that, a divine exchange student in a mortal war camp, probably failing to blend in because he kept glowing. You picture it. Ares watching mortals fight not for glory, but survival. It must have puzzled him. To a god, death is a concept, not a consequence. But for humans, every swing of a sword carries the full weight of meaning. That contrast will haunt him forever. The thrill of combat versus the cost of it. Back on Olympus, he continues his lessons with grim focus. Archery with Apollo, horseback training with Hermes, who cheats naturally, and tactical lectures from Athena that mostly turn into arguments. Sometimes, Hera watches from a distance, arms crossed, pretending not to care, but clearly keeping score. Every time Ares lands even one hit on Athena, Hera smiles slightly, as if her son's progress restores a fraction of her pride. But victories are rare. Most days, he ends up bruised, winded, and fuming. Once, he punches a hole clean through a cloud, and the rain that falls on Greece that day is said to have carried the taste of divine frustration. He's not the only one learning, though. The others are learning what kind of god he's becoming. Not noble like Apollo, not cunning like Hermes, and certainly not serene like Athena. Ares is pure emotion. When he fights, there's no elegance, no restraint, just intent. Watching him is like watching a storm realize it has fists. Athena sees it too. One afternoon, after another spar, she looks at him with something that might be admiration, or maybe worry. "You'll be great one day," she says softly, "but God's helped the world when you are." He doesn't answer. He just picks up his spear and walks off into the glow of the setting sun, shoulders tense, face unreadable. You follow him down a narrow path lined with statues of heroes, yet unborn. The air hums with stories waiting to happen. He pauses at the last step, staring down at the mortal world again. This time, he doesn't just watch. He reaches out a hand as if he could touch it. The clouds curl around his fingers like smoke, and for a moment, you glimpse the reflection of 1,000 future battlefields. Spears clashing, shields breaking, mortals shouting his name without even knowing it. Ares smiles faintly. The sound of war is calling him, even if Olympus still calls it training. Above, Athena watches quietly, expression unreadable. She knows what's coming, even if he doesn't. The forge hums again somewhere in the distance, the echo of fate's hammer shaping the next phase of his story. And when it fades, Ares is no longer just a student. He's something far more dangerous, a god who's starting to believe it himself. You blink again, and Olympus melts away like steam rising from a freshly doused forge. The clouds part, and below them spreads a scar of bronze and blood, the mortal world, ancient and trembling with noise. You feel the first tremor of battle roll through the ground like a heartbeat, and standing on the ridge above it all is Ares. He's no longer the awkward, angry student now. He's fully armored, gleaming red and gold, his spear casting reflections like shards of sunlight. His eyes burn, not with cruelty exactly, but with hunger. This is his first real war. The first time mortals will shout his name not as a curse or a prayer, but both at once. You stand beside him on that ridge, invisible, as the world below descends into chaos. The air smells of iron and dust. Spears splinter. Shields splashed with mud rise and fall like waves. It's loud, deafening even, and Ares just closes his eyes, inhaling deeply as if this cacophony were a long-awaited symphony. It hits you then. War is his music, and this is his debut performance. The myths don't tell you which battle it was. Historians still argue whether Ares' first appearance happened in Thrace, where his cult would later flourish, or in some nameless skirmish lost to time. But it doesn't matter. What matters is this: Ares is finally alive. He steps forward, each stride echoing like thunder. The mortals don't see him clearly, only flashes of red, shadows moving too fast, the smell of ozone right before lightning hits. To one side, a soldier swings and misses. To the other, another screams in triumph he can't explain. Both believe the gods are watching. They're right. You watch as Ares wades into the chaos, not to kill but to stir. Wherever he walks, the fear thickens, the courage sharpens. The air itself seems to vibrate with energy. You realize something subtle. Ares doesn't take sides. He's not interested in winners or losers. He just wants the rhythm of battle to keep going. And yet, there's something almost childlike in the way he moves. Every clash, every shout, every spark feels new to him. He's testing the limits of his power, like a musician learning which notes make the world tremble. A fringe tidbit from obscure mythographers claims that during his first battle, Ares accidentally caused an earthquake because he stomped too hard in excitement. The mortals later called it a sign of divine fury. You suspect it was just a clumsy war god getting carried away. The scene shifts again. You're closer now, in the thick of the fight. Ares stands over a fallen warrior, looking down with an expression that's not quite pity and not quite pride. He kneels, placing a hand on the man's chest, and whispers something low and strange. The man's eyes flutter, then close. It's not mercy. It's understanding. Ares doesn't hate mortals. He just envies them. Their lives burn fast. Their choices matter. When they fight, It's for love, or land, or fear. For him, it's instinct. Eternal. Endless. You step back as Ares rises, streaked with dust and blood, his armor dulled now, his face unreadable. Around him, the battle begins to die down. Not from peace, just exhaustion. The mortals are spent, trembling, looking around as if waking from a fever dream. Ares doesn't linger. He just turns away, the faintest frown crossing his face. He's learned something new tonight. Victory is boring. The moment the noise stops, he feels the silence gnaw at him. Without the clash, without the chaos, he's just another god with nothing to do. Up above, you sense movement. Athena watches from a cloud-edge balcony, arms crossed, expression somewhere between pity and exasperation. She understands this lesson better than anyone. Wars always end, but Ares never does. You walk beside him as he leaves the field. His footsteps sink into the muddy earth, and each one leaves behind a faint glow, like embers cooling after a fire. You realize the battlefield will remember him, not in stories or carvings, but in the feeling left behind. The next time these mortals fight, they'll fight harder, angrier. His presence lingers like smoke in their blood. He stops at the edge of a river, washes his hands, and stares at the crimson water swirling away. For a long time, he says nothing. Then softly, almost to himself, "They call this glory?" The wind doesn't answer. Ares sits on a rock, the night pressing in around him. He removes his helmet, sets it beside him, and lets the cool air touch his face. For a moment, he looks tired, truly tired, not physically, but in that soul-deep way of someone who's tasted the thing they thought they wanted and found it hollow. You remember the lonely child wandering Olympus and realize he hasn't changed much. The battlefield just replaced the palace. Different noise, same emptiness. A few hours later, as dawn stains the sky pink, a small group of mortals stumbles upon the place where he sat. They see the footprints glowing faintly and call it a miracle. By evening, someone's already building a tiny altar there. Humans, it seems, are very quick to worship what frightens them. It won't be long before Ares has his first cult, small, fierce, and unashamed. They'll pray not for peace, but for courage. You can almost hear the chant in the distance already. Ares, make us strong enough to survive the noise. You glance at him one last time as he vanishes into the morning mist. He's heading back toward Olympus, no doubt expecting applause, or at least acknowledgement. What he'll get instead is silence, and maybe a lecture from Athena about restraint. Still, he smiles faintly as he walks. He doesn't need their approval anymore. He's found something better, purpose, even if it's the kind that tears worlds apart. You feel the ground settle behind him, the first true echo of his name rolling across history. It sounds less like thunder and more like a sigh. You follow Ares back to Olympus, and the mountain seems unusually quiet. Maybe it's because the gods can already feel what he's done, his presence still charged with the static of battle, the faint metallic scent of blood clinging to his armor. You can almost imagine the divine whispers rustling through the marble halls. He's finally done it. He's found his war. But not everyone's impressed. Zeus sits upon his throne, thunder curling lazily around his fingers like petulant cats. Hera lounges beside him, eyes sharp, a little proud maybe, but mostly anxious. She knows her son too well. The others, Hermes, Apollo, Athena, stand scattered across the gleaming chamber, pretending to be disinterested but definitely watching. Ares strides in, head high, helmet under one arm. "It's done," he says simply, voice still vibrating with leftover adrenaline. "They fought. They died. They remembered me." Zeus just hums, deep and slow. And it was magnificent," Ares says, almost breathless. There's a long silence, the kind that feels like a trap. Finally, Athena steps forward, her armor whispering like silk. "Magnificent," she repeats softly. "You mean chaotic, unplanned, and needlessly cruel. I saw it." Ares turns, a little spark flaring in his chest. "War is chaos," he snaps. "That's what makes it real." You can almost see the lightning forming between them. Not Zeus's kind, but something sharper, colder. Athena's eyes narrow, the faintest smile ghosting her lips. "Real, yes," she says, "but meaningless." You don't fight for justice or strategy. You just like the noise. Ouch. Even Hermes winces a little. Aries doesn't answer right away. For the first time, he looks uncertain. Maybe, he admits finally. But someone has to love the noise. Otherwise, who would stand in it? Historians still argue whether this moment, the first real disagreement between Athena and Ares, symbolized the eternal clash between reason and passion, strategy and brute force. Some even think it's an allegory invented centuries later to explain why Greeks built two temples, one to each of them, side by side on the Acropolis. Two opposites, forever glaring at each other across the marble. Zeus leans back, stroking his beard, a little smirk curling his mouth. Let them argue, he says. The world needs both, the mind and the muscle. Ares, you may go. Try not to break anything on your way out. That last bit earns a laugh from Hermes, a scowl from Ares, and a quiet too late from Hephaestus under his breath. You trail after Ares as he storms out of the hall. He's all sharp edges now, muttering under his breath, sparks flashing at his heels. He heads toward the training grounds again, but this time, not to fight alone. Ares wants followers. Down among the clouds, mortals are already whispering his name. You can hear the first war chants taking form in the distance. Ares decides to meet them halfway. He descends to Thrace, a rugged land of mountains and mist, where the tribes already live by the sword. It's the perfect audience. They don't pray for peace. They pray for victory. When Ares arrives, red glow cutting through the fog, they drop to their knees. He doesn't need temples or gold offerings. What he wants is loyalty, and these warriors give it willingly. They dedicate their first hunt to him, their first scar, their first victory. You watch as the first sacred flame to Ares is lit, a bonfire of spears and shields. The smoke twists upward, forming shapes that almost look like wings. Ares stands before them, silent, face half-shadowed by firelight. Fight bravely, he says, and I'll walk beside you. Fight cowardly, and I'll watch you fall. The crowd roars its approval. Somewhere in the noise, you think he actually smiles. A lesser-known myth, one of those fringe ones you find scribbled in cracked clay, claims Ares taught the Thracians to forge singing blades, weapons designed to hum when swung fast enough through the air. The sound, supposedly, would summon him. Modern scholars doubt it, of course, but you can almost imagine it. An eerie metallic hymn echoing across the battlefield, half music, half menace. As the night deepens, you sit beside Ares near the embers of the fire. For once, he seems calm. They understand, he says softly. They don't worship me because they fear death. They worship me because they accept it. You realize that's the heart of it. Ares isn't about cruelty. He's about inevitability. War, to him, is the truth that mortals can't escape. And maybe that's why they respect him, even when they curse his name. Still, something in him remains restless. Even as his first worshippers dance around the flames, he looks to the horizon, eyes flickering like a storm about to break. You know he's thinking about Athena, about Zeus's smirk, about Olympus, where no one seems to understand what he's found. Let them stay in their clouds, he mutters finally. I'll stay where the world bleeds. You tilt your head, watching the god of war, watching his new kingdom. He's finally found his place, but it's one built on noise and smoke. You can't help wondering how long before it consumes him. Above, the moon slips through clouds, and for a moment, the battlefield below gleams silver. The mortals sleep, their weapons beside them. The fires crackle low, whispering Ares' name to the dark. And somewhere on Olympus, Athena sits awake, staring down at the same glow, already planning how to counter him. Not out of malice, but out of balance. Because where Ares walks, someone has to build again. The night ends quietly, surprisingly so. No thunder, no screaming, no divine reprimands. Just a god in red armor sitting among sleeping mortals, eyes soft, mind whirring. For all his noise, Ares dreams in silence. The dawn rises pale and uncertain over Thrace, spilling light across a landscape that still smells faintly of smoke and iron. You follow Ares as he walks through the dew-damp grass, his armor glinting in soft flashes. He doesn't seem like a god right now, More like a soldier who's forgotten to take off his uniform after the war's over. You trail beside him in silence until he stops at a low hill. From here, you can see the Thracian warriors waking below, their tents fluttering like exhausted lungs. Children run between fires, dogs bark, someone's already sharpening a blade. It's life, but a hard, relentless kind. Ares breathes it in like air. He mutters, half to himself, "They'll need me again before the moon's full." He's right. Mortals always find a reason to fight. Land, pride, revenge, the price of grain, doesn't matter. Conflict is baked into the world, like salt into sea foam. And Ares, he's the tide. He doesn't start wars, not really. He just makes sure they don't stop too soon. That morning, messengers from another tribe arrive. Tall men wearing wolf skins and carrying gifts of bronze and mead. They kneel before Ares, offering him a gleaming spear tip carved with symbols of blood and wind. The leader bows low and says, "Lord of courage, make our enemies fear the sky." Ares smiles faintly. "Fear isn't the goal," he says. "Let them fear losing." That subtle difference, fear of defeat, not of death, is something historians still argue about. Was Ares simply bloodthirsty? Or did he understand something deeper about human ambition? Some scholars say his philosophy hinted at the first idea of honor in battle, centuries before it became formal code. Others insist that's giving him too much credit. You walk with him later as he visits a makeshift shrine at the edge of camp, a pile of shields stacked like turtle shells, smeared with ochre and ash. Ares kneels before it, tracing a finger across one battered emblem. You think you see his mouth twitch, almost like a prayer, though it's impossible to imagine to whom. Then a whisper breaks the stillness. "Praying to yourself now, brother?" You spin around and there she is, Athena, glowing faintly gold in the sunlight, her spear glimmering like intellect itself. Ares doesn't rise. He doesn't even look at her. "Came to gloat." She shakes her head slowly. "To warn you." The air thickens between them. Two forces that can never truly coexist. You can practically feel the world hold its breath. Athena glances toward the mortals below. "You think they need you," she says softly. "But too much of your kind of courage, and they'll destroy themselves." "They already do," Ares replies. "At least with me, they understand why." Athena sighs, a sound like a sword sliding into its sheath. Understanding doesn't make fire any less hot. They stand there for a while, neither backing down. The quiet between them is sharp, a perfect tension of love and rivalry. Historians still argue whether the myths of their sibling tension were allegories for Greek politics, the eternal pull between order and chaos, between city and frontier. Whatever the truth, it's clear the balance matters. Without Athena's logic, Ares is just noise. Without his fury, she's just cold calculation. Before leaving, Athena looks back once more. "Father won't protect you forever," she says. "Even Zeus tires of your thunder." "Then I'll make my own storms," Ares answers simply. When she disappears, the world feels emptier. Even Ares seems dimmer for a moment, though he hides it behind a scoff. "Always so serious," he mutters. "You'd think war was a math problem." A small laugh escapes you, surprising even yourself. He glances your way, and though he can't see you, it feels like he almost could. "What?" he says. You think she's right. You hesitate. Maybe she is. But then again, without people like him, the stories wouldn't move forward. And maybe that's the secret of Ares. He's not the reason things fall apart. He's the proof they can. By evening, the Thracians are preparing again. The fires blaze higher, the warriors paint their faces red, and the rhythmic drumbeat of war begins, steady, hypnotic. You feel it in your chest. It's not rage exactly. It's anticipation, like the pause before lightning hits. Ares stands at the center, head tilted back, eyes closed. He's not smiling, not shouting, just listening. He's learning to conduct this chaos, not drown in it. Then, from the edge of camp, an old woman appears, walking with a limp, carrying a bowl of water sprinkled with poppy petals. She looks up at him, fearless. "War god," she says, "you protect the strong, but who protects the weak?" Ares blinks. For once, he doesn't have an answer. It's a small moment, but it ripples deep. Aries reaches out and gently dips his fingers into the bowl. The petals cling to his knuckles, like blood that refuses to wash away. Maybe, he says quietly, that's not my part to play. The woman nods, then finds someone whose it is. She leaves, vanishing into the dusk like a lesson whispered and forgotten. Later, sitting beside the embers again, Aries watches the sky turn the color of old wine. He's silent for a long time, then murmurs, "They think war is about power. It's not. It's about memory." You realize what he means. Wars aren't about who wins. They're about who's remembered. And that, perhaps, is what he truly wants. Not blood, not fear, but permanence. The wind stirs, carrying the scent of burnt grass and mead. You can hear faint echoes of laughter from the camp, mixed with mourning songs for those who fell last night. Life and death, dancing hand in hand. Aries closes his eyes. "That's enough for now," he whispers. And for once, the god of war lets himself rest. When you open your eyes again, the world has shifted. The campfires are cold ash now, and Aries is already moving. The god of war never stays still for long. He's a storm looking for somewhere new to strike. You follow as he strides through valleys draped in morning fog, his armor whispering with each step. The mortals who once worshipped him sleep in their graves now, but new ones rise in their place. War never dies, it just changes names. Aries travels south, toward the lands that will someday call themselves Hellas. He moves like a rumor, appearing on battlefields that spring up almost by accident. A feud between farmers, a border dispute, a stolen goat. Each one turns into a story soaked in blood and legend. Wherever he goes, the air grows sharper, the world less patient. You can tell he's learned something since Thrace. His movements are more deliberate now, less frantic. He's not just feeding on war, he's shaping it. You realize Aries is maturing, though mature might be a stretch for a god who still thinks diplomacy is just battle with worse lighting. He stops on a rocky slope overlooking a small village. Below, a clash unfolds between rival clans, shields flashing like fish scales. Aries doesn't intervene this time. He watches, observes, the way the warriors move, the way fear and courage ripple through their ranks like wind over grass. "This," he says softly, "is evolution." It's strange hearing him talk about progress, almost scholarly. Historians still argue whether Aries truly represented barbarism or whether his cult secretly preserved ancient codes of warfare that later inspired the Greek hoplite system. Some even claim early generals prayed to him not for bloodlust, but for discipline, the ability to hold the line. Whatever the truth, you can see it in his eyes now. He's not the chaos himself anymore. He's learning to conduct it. At night, he sits by a dying fire, alone except for a few mortal stragglers who don't know who he is. One of them, a boy, maybe 16, shivers in the cold, clutching a dented helmet. Aries offers him his cloak without a word. The boy blinks. "Why would you help me?" Aries shrugs. "You're still breathing. That's worth something." The boy steadies him for a moment, then asks, "Have you ever lost?" The question lands like a blade between ribs. Aries looks into the fire for a long while before saying, "Not yet, but I'm waiting for it." The boy frowns. "Why would you want to lose?" Aries' mouth curves into a small, almost wistful smile. "Because then I'd know what all this means." You don't quite know what he means either, but it sounds like the first honest thing he said since Olympus. When dawn comes again, the boy is gone, back to his world of fragile flesh and fleeting courage. Aries remains, watching the smoke rise from distant fires. For a moment, he looks genuinely weary, not of war, but of being needed by it. Then, as if summoned by that thought, a familiar voice cuts through the air. Still brooding, Aries turns to see Aphrodite, not glowing with perfection like the poets describe, but soft, radiant, eyes like melted honey. She's wearing mortal clothes, a linen dress, dust on her feet. Somehow, it makes her even more divine. "Shouldn't you be breaking hearts somewhere?" he says, though there's a smirk tugging at his mouth. "Shouldn't you be breaking everything else?" she fires back. They stand in silence for a beat. Then Aries laughs, real laughter, rare and warm. It startles even him. Aphrodite tilts her head. There it is, she says. A sound that isn't war. This is the part myths often rush past. The beginning of something between them that's not entirely lust and not entirely respect. It's something stranger. She sits beside him, unbothered by the dirt, and says, "You look tired, my storm." "I don't sleep much," he admits. "Too much noise." "Always." Aphrodite hums softly, twirling a strand of her hair. "You know," she says, "I think we're more alike than they say. You make mortals fight. I make them love. Either way, they bleed." Ares chuckles. "Yours at least want to." That earns a soft smile. She leans closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The difference is, mine forgive me afterward." You can feel it, the air between them humming like harp strings. Even the ground seems to lean closer. There's an old, fringe myth, almost certainly made up by later poets, that claims when Ares and Aphrodite first touched hands, every blade within 50 miles turned slightly toward the sun, as if saluting. Romantic nonsense, maybe. But watching them now, you start to believe it. Their connection doesn't dull Ares, it refines him. He doesn't stop being war. He just starts to understand its twin. Love, like war, demands surrender. It requires the courage to risk everything. They sit there until the stars blink awake, talking softly. She tells him about laughter, art, beauty, all the things he's ignored. He listens, really listens, and when she finally stands to leave, he reaches out. "Stay," he says. Aphrodite hesitates, her smile fading into something almost sad. "You'd hate me by morning," she says. "Love makes peace, and you'd find that unbearable." "Maybe," Ares says, "but I'd like to try." When she vanishes, the wind feels warmer somehow, softer. You can tell something has shifted deep inside him. Not peace exactly, but possibility. He looks up at the stars, muttering, "Maybe war doesn't end love. Maybe it's what makes it matter." You can't help but smile. That's the kind of line poets will steal for centuries. It begins with a summons, one of those divine messages that feels less like an invitation and more like a storm pressing against your lungs. The voice isn't spoken aloud. It simply arrives in Ares' mind, sharp and resonant as bronze striking marble. "Ares, Olympus calls. You have gone too long among mortals." He stiffens. Even Aphrodite, reclining nearby, senses it instantly. The night fire flickers, and her eyes narrow. "They've noticed," she says softly. Ares doesn't reply. He rises, brushing dust from his armor that now looks strangely dull compared to the mortal glow of the fire. For days he's been teaching men to fight with rhythm, to honor their fallen, to treat battle like a discipline rather than chaos. But that's exactly what Olympus can't tolerate, a god of war who teaches restraint. "Will you go?" you ask, though the question feels redundant. He glances toward the stars, toward that invisible stairway of light that leads home. "I always do." But when Aphrodite steps toward him, you catch the faintest tremor in his breath. "Don't let them strip this from you," she whispers. "Whatever you found here, keep it." He almost smiles. If they could take it, it wasn't real. Then the air fractures. A spear of lightning pierces the sky, and in an instant, you're gone from a mortal world, whisked upward through clouds that burn like incense and freeze like judgment. Olympus looms ahead, golden, cold, immaculate. The air tastes like divinity, which is to say, like power without mercy. The gods are already assembled. Zeus on his throne, Poseidon restless beside him, Athena watching with the calm of a sharpened blade. Even Hermes, lounging nearby, looks unusually tense. Ares stands in the center, bareheaded, the faint scent of earth and smoke still clinging to him. He looks more human than divine. Zeus's voice cracks like thunder. "You consort with mortals. You train them. You've forgotten what you are." "I remember exactly what I am," Ares replies evenly. "I am the reason they look up at the sky and still believe in us." A dangerous silence. Athena steps forward, her eyes cool and precise. "Belief born of fear is not devotion. You teach them to control war. Soon they'll think they can control you." "They already can't," he says with a small grin. "You'd be surprised how much they understand. They fight not for glory now, but for each other." Zeus slams his scepter down. The air shakes. Enough. You were made for battle, not for philosophy. You are the storm, not the calm. Ares looks up at his father, and there's something heartbreakingly steady in his tone. Even storms end, father. Or would you have thunder echo forever? It's the most dangerous thing he's ever said. Hermes lets out a low whistle. Apollo, who's been silent till now, leans forward. He's right, you know. Even light fades. But what he's playing with, it isn't peace. It's change. And change is the one thing Olympus cannot survive. You can feel the air tighten. Every god here lives on the certainty of their domains. If mortals stop fearing war, if they stop praying for victory, Ares' temples will empty. And if his temples empty, others will follow. Your interference blurs the line. Athena says coldly. Mortals must worship us, not imitate us. They already imitate us. Ares snaps. Every jealous act, every betrayal, every hunger for power, that's your reflection. I just taught them to face it honestly. Zeus rises, lightning coiling around his wrists. You overstep. Ares meets his gaze, without flinching. Then strike me. See if you can. It's not defiance, it's revelation. He's not challenging power, he's exposing its fear. The throne room trembles. For a heartbeat. You think Zeus might actually unleash it. But Hera, ever the strategist, lifts a hand. No, let him go. Her voice drips with irony. If he loves mortals so much, let him live as one. Strip his divinity. Cast him down until he learns to crave war again. The words hit harder than any thunderbolt. You see realization flicker across Ares' face. Immortality, the pulse of eternity inside him, begins to fracture. His aura dims. The gold from his skin fades like embers cooling. Aphrodite appears then. She must have followed, despite the risk. No, she cries, stepping between him and Zeus. You can't. But the decree is made. Zeus doesn't even look at her. In a burst of white fire, Ares is unmade, his godhood torn away, like armor peeled from flesh. The chamber fills with the smell of burnt iron and ozone. You shield your eyes, and when you open them again, he's gone. Aphrodite collapses where he stood, trembling. Even Athena looks away. Hermes mutters, so ends the god of war. But Aphrodite, her voice barely a whisper, says something the others don't hear. No, so begins the man who once was. And you, tethered somehow still to his story, feel yourself falling through cloud and light in memory, chasing the trace of a god reborn as something terrifyingly mortal. The descent is long. The world below grows larger, louder, heavier. When you finally hit the earth again, you hear the unmistakable sound of breath, fragile, human, alive. Ares opens his eyes beneath a tree, blood on his hands, heartbeat pounding like a drum. He is no longer divine. He is real. And Olympus, for the first time in eternity, has something to fear. The morning after Aphrodite's visit feels different, less like dawn and more like an afterglow. The world seems to breathe slower, as if even the wind is curious about what happened between the god of war and the goddess of love. You walk beside Ares as he moves through the valley, his steps quieter than usual, his armor catching the light, like an afterthought rather than a declaration. He doesn't say much, but there's a strange softness around him now. You can sense it. The way the air bends near him, how his presence feels less like a storm and more like the pause between thunderclaps. It's unnerving, almost tender. He stops at a small river, kneels, and stares at his reflection rippling in the water. She said love makes peace. He murmurs. But peace feels like waiting to fight again. That's Ares for you. Romantic in the most catastrophically wrong way possible. You can't blame him. He's a god built from conflict, sculpted by divine tension. The idea that calm could be something to want instead of something to end is almost incomprehensible to him. He stands, flicks the water from his fingers, and looks toward the horizon where dark clouds are gathering again. Let's see if the world has remembered me, he says, half smiling. And oh, it has. By the time you reach the next valley, the air is buzzing with the scent of sweat and oil. Warriors are training, hundreds of them. Shields clash, spears snap. The ground shudders under synchronized marches. These aren't just men of Thrace now. They come from all over: Corinth, Thebes, Sparta. Each carries a symbol of Ares somewhere on their armor: a red lion, a wolf's head, a crimson feather. He watches them like a proud teacher, though he'd never admit it. Better, he mutters. Less panic, more rhythm. Historians still argue whether the rise of organized warfare in Greece, the phalanx formation, the emphasis on discipline, was an evolution of Ares' influence. Some call him the patron of brute chaos. Others say he was the spark that taught men to fight together. Both might be true. The best storms have order in their destruction. One commander notices him, doesn't recognize him as a god, of course, just sees a tall stranger with a confident stride. "You there," he shouts. "You've the look of a warrior. Join us." Ares grins. Gladly. What follows is both hilarious and terrifying. Ares doesn't join the training. He takes it over. Within minutes, he's corrected every formation, shouted half the soldiers into terrified efficiency, and personally demonstrated how to use a spear like you mean it. You watch as mortals scurry to obey, half in awe, half in absolute panic. At one point, a young fighter makes a clumsy mistake. His spear slips, and Ares catches it mid-fall without looking. "Focus," he says quietly. "If you fear dying, you'll just die scared." That line spreads like wildfire. By sunset, it's a proverb. Later, as they feast, the men gather around him. Someone passes him a jug of wine. Someone else sings. It's rough and human and beautiful in its imperfection. For the first time, Ares isn't separate from them. He laughs when they laugh, eats when they eat. A god among mortals, not above them, but with them. Then, from somewhere in the shadows, a familiar laugh rings out. You turn, and Aphrodite steps into the firelight, radiant as ever, though tonight she's wearing a soldier's cloak. "You're blending in nicely," she teases. Ares smirks. "Maybe I'm tired of being worshipped from afar." "Careful," she says, pouring herself wine. "You might start liking them." "Maybe I already do." She tilts her head, studying him. "Then you'll break your own heart before they ever could." It's a warning wrapped in affection, and you can tell it lands. Still, she sits beside him, her hand brushing his. Around them, mortals cheer and sing, oblivious that love and war are sitting side by side at their fire. There's a fringe myth, barely a whisper from an obscure Thracian poet, that says when Ares and Aphrodite laughed together, the stars flickered as if uncertain whether to shine brighter or hide. It's probably poetic exaggeration, but tonight, the constellations do seem unusually restless. As the fire burns low, Aphrodite leans close. "Do you ever wonder," she murmurs, "if what you call courage is just fear that's found a purpose?" Ares thinks about it for a long moment. "If it gets them through the night," he says, "I don't care what they call it." She smiles. Maybe that's love, too. The conversation fades into a comfortable hush. You listen to the crackling fire, the distant sound of a lyre, the faint rustle of sleep settling over the camp. For once, Ares looks peaceful. Not conquered, not changed, but balanced. It's unsettling, watching the god of war at rest, like seeing lightning pause in midair. But deep inside, you sense something shifting. The more he walks among mortals, the more he feels their fragility seeping into him. Love has made him curious. Mortality has made him aware. He looks at the stars again, whispering, maybe peace isn't the absence of war. Maybe it's what survives it. You realize something chilling. He's not done learning. He's just beginning to understand what war costs. And the gods, as you'll soon see, don't like it when one of their own starts to change. Dawn drifts in like smoke, and the village hums awake around you. Ares, still going by no name, hauls water from a well as roosters crow and children chase each other between olive trees. He's starting to look less like a fallen god, and more like the kind of man who's done a lot of living and just enough regretting. But the peace doesn't last. It never does. You notice it first in the whispers, travelers bringing rumors from the next valley, armies marching, kings sharpening their ambitions. You can almost feel it in the air, that unmistakable metallic scent before the first strike of lightning. War is coming. Ares pretends not to care. He repairs a broken cartwheel, hammers a bent nail, teaches the baker's boy how to throw a stone without breaking his wrist. Yet every time someone mentions the soldiers, his eyes flick toward the horizon like a magnet to iron. He's restless, like thunder pacing behind the clouds. That night, he can't sleep. The moon hangs low, pale as bone. You sit beside him as he stares into the embers. Do you miss it? You ask quietly. He exhales. Miss what? The noise, the chaos, the purpose, he finishes for you. Yes, but not the noise. Never the noise. He leans back, watching a spark float up and vanish. Mortals think war is a storm that comes and goes. They never realize they are the weather. There's that strange poetry again, the kind that slips out of him when he forgets to sound invincible. Historians still argue whether this version of Ares ever truly existed, the war god who learned stillness. Some call it a lost allegory written by pacifist poets in late antiquity. Others insist it's a hidden parable about self-control. But sitting here, listening to him breathe, you realize it doesn't matter. Real or imagined, the man before you feels truer than any statue. By morning, the soldiers arrive. They're not much, mercenaries serving a petty warlord. They demand supplies, threaten to burn the crops, claim the gods have blessed their campaign. Ares steps forward, his hands empty. You think the gods care who wins? He asks them. The captain snorts. You some kind of priest? Ares smiles faintly. Something like that. The man swings his sword. Ares catches the blade bare-handed. Metal screeches, sparks fly. The mercenaries freeze, eyes wide. Ares' palm bleeds, but he doesn't flinch. I told you, he says softly. The gods don't choose sides. They become them. And in that heartbeat, something ancient wakes. You can feel it in the soil beneath your feet. The pulse of old war, the echo of bronze and fury. His divinity isn't back, not fully, but it's remembering him. He fights, but it's different now. No roars, no gloating. Just motion, precise, efficient, merciful. When it's over, 3 men lie groaning, none dead. The rest run. He wipes his bloody hand on his tunic, muttering, "Still too easy." The villagers cheer. He hates it. That night, as they celebrate again, he sits apart, staring into the fire. You know what he's thinking. Peace feels fragile when your soul is built for noise. Athena would probably appear right now if she could, float in with that infuriating calm, and say something like, "See, brother, even mortals can learn balance." And he'd roll his eyes, muttering, "Balance is just boredom with better posture." You almost laugh at the thought. Later, a young woman approaches him, the daughter of the farmer he once helped. She's carrying a bowl of stew, nervous but determined. "My father says you saved us again," she says. "I wanted to thank you." Ares looks at her, genuinely confused. For what? For doing what no one else would. He accepts the bowl, nodding slightly. You'd be surprised how many people do what they must. They just don't write songs about it. She smiles, then adds quietly, "The gods must love you." He almost chokes on his stew. "Not lately." She laughs, and for a fleeting instant, you catch something impossible, a shimmer around him, like moonlight flickering on metal. A reminder, a threat, or maybe forgiveness. He gazes toward the mountains, knowing exactly what waits beyond them. War always calls him back. By the next sunrise, he's gone. No farewell. No footprints. Only the pendant left behind, hanging on a branch, still warm to the touch. The villagers will tell stories. Some say he was a demigod, others a ghost. A few whisper that he was Ares himself, walking among them. And Olympus? Olympus stays silent, except perhaps for Athena, who, if you listen closely enough, might sigh and murmur to the wind. At least he learned something this time. Because for all her rivalry, she always did understand him best. You wake to the rasp of wind through pine needles and the sound of a man trying to remember how to breathe. It takes you a moment to realize that the man is Ares, and that for the first time since the dawn of myth, his chest rises and falls with mortal rhythm. The divine hum that once pulsed under his skin is gone. In its place, blood, sweat, and the kind of ache that reminds you of gravity. He groans, sitting up slowly, and every joint protests like rusted armor. So this is mortality, he mutters. Feels heavier than advertised. You glance around. The air smells of earth and rain. You're somewhere in Thrace, maybe. The hills that once sang with war drums, but now host nothing louder than grazing goats. He tries to stand. The effort nearly knocks him over. Balance, he grumbles, is for lesser beings. Then he stumbles again, immediately disproving his own point. The sun climbs lazily above the horizon, and for a moment, its warmth makes him forget everything. Olympus, Aphrodite's tears, Zeus's judgment. For the first time, warmth doesn't arrive because of him, it simply is. Historians still argue whether this mortal exile was ever recorded in official myth. Some say Ares never left Olympus, others that he lived disguised among men. But here, in this sleepy version of the world, you see him learning to be human in the least dignified way possible. He spends days wandering. By the third morning, hunger hits him, a sensation utterly new. You watch him glare at a fig tree, as though it's mocking him. You expect me to climb, he complains. But he does, eventually. Not gracefully. By the time he returns to the ground, his forearms are scratched and his pride is bruised. But the fruit tastes divine in a way ambrosia never did. A nearby farmer spots him and laughs. You look like you've wrestled a boar and lost. Ares blinks. I was victorious in a sense. The farmer, unimpressed, hands him a crust of bread and walks away. Ares stares at it like it's a relic. The crust cuts his gums a little when he bites it, but the flavor makes his eyes widen. Mortals, he mutters, almost in awe. You eat pain and call it flavor. Over the weeks that follow, he learns other mortal arts, stumbling through speech, laughter, fatigue. You watch him discover that night isn't just the absence of light. It's the quiet weight of time passing. One evening, he sits by a fire with a group of travelers. They're telling stories of the gods. His name comes up, loud, boastful, feared. They talk about Ares the Destroyer, the blood-drunk storm who revels in chaos. He listens silently, poking at the fire with a stick. A child asks, "Do you think he was ever kind?" Her father chuckles. "Kind? That one. Only if he mistook you for someone worth sparing." Ares's lips twitch, not in anger, but amusement. He takes a sip of wine and murmurs, "Maybe he just had bad teachers." No one hears him over the crackling fire. Later that night, while the others sleep, he looks up at the stars. They still watch, he says softly. They always do. And though you can't hear it, you imagine the faintest whisper from Olympus, a sigh, maybe, or a chuckle. The gods never fully let go. The next morning, Ares finds work helping the villagers. He hauls stones, repairs fences, and occasionally scares off bandits with nothing but a glare. He's shockingly good at it. Turns out a god of war makes an excellent construction worker. He even starts teaching the villagers little lessons. How to stand firm when they're afraid. How to aim a sling. How to run toward a problem instead of away from it. But there's no cruelty in it. No bloodlust. Only purpose. One old woman, grateful for his help, gives him a small bronze pendant, an old, dented thing shaped like a spearhead. "For luck," she says. He takes it carefully. "Luck," he repeats, as though tasting a foreign word. "I used to be that." Time slides by, soft and uneventful. One afternoon, a band of mercenaries rides through the village, demanding tribute. The people look to Ares. Instinct flares in his eyes, but he hesitates. He could kill them easily. He wants to. But that would undo everything he's learned. Instead, he steps forward calmly and says, "You can have my work, not my fear." It's not a threat. It's an invitation. The leader sneers, tries to strike him. Bad idea. Ares sidesteps, grabs the man's arm, and twists. You hear the pop of bone, a clean, efficient motion. The others flee. The villagers stare, half in awe, half in horror. Ares sighs. "See, this is why I can't have nice things." That night, they feast in his honor. They don't know they're dining with the god of war, only that some wanderer saved their lives. And Ares, once worshipped through blood, now receives gratitude through bread, wine, and laughter. He feels something loosen inside him. something ancient and armored. He realizes he doesn't miss Olympus. He misses purpose. And here, among mortals, he's found a new kind of battlefield, one fought not with blades, but with patience. Still, as the firelight dances on his face, you catch a shadow flicker behind his eyes. War never leaves quietly. He'll have to face it again soon. Maybe not tomorrow, but soon. The stars seem to pulse above, like silent drums waiting for their cue. You find him again, because of course you do, on the road leading east, where dust clings to his boots and the air hums with distant drums. The world is changing. Empires rise, philosophies bloom, and yet, somewhere in the distance, there's still that familiar sound of armies testing their courage against fate. He's heading straight for it. Ares never could ignore a call to battle, no matter how hard he tried to pretend otherwise. As you walk beside him, the scent of sweat and olive oil fills the air. The sky is an unbroken sheet of blue, cruel in its calm. He looks like any other wanderer, scarred, quiet, carrying nothing but a battered spear. But when you glance at his eyes, you see it, that flicker of something ancient and molten. The Trojan plain stretches before you, golden and endless. You know this story already, the greatest war ever sung, the playground of heroes and fools alike. But you've never seen it from his angle. He doesn't arrive as a god this time. Not entirely. More like an echo, half shadow, half memory, drawn to the madness he once ruled. The smell of smoke and iron greets you long before the city walls do. Corpses lie where poets will later pretend they were glorious. The ground is slick with the memory of ambition. He watches quietly as soldiers drag the wounded, as women weep behind broken gates. This, he murmurs, is what they still call honor. Historians still argue whether Ares truly fought at Troy or merely watched. Homer paints him as petulant and blood-drunk, wounded by Diomedes with Athena's help, humiliated by mortals again. But that's not quite how it feels here. Here, it's not humiliation. It's exhaustion. He doesn't stride into battle like a thunderstorm anymore. He walks among men like a mirror they don't want to look into. At the Greek camp, you hear them boast, Achilles sharpening his wrath, Agamemnon polishing his excuses. Every man certain his name will outlast the ashes. Ares listens and shakes his head. They all pray for victory, none for understanding. Then Athena arrives. She doesn't walk, of course. She appears, all light and precision, her armor gleaming like logic itself. So, she says coolly, you couldn't stay away. Ares sighs. You didn't think you'd have all the fun, did you? Her mouth twitches, almost a smile. You call this fun. You call it strategy. They stand like two sides of a coin that can never stop flipping. Athena eyes him carefully. You've changed. Don't tell Zeus, he mutters. She circles him once, her spear glinting. You're weaker, but you're quieter. I can't decide which is more dangerous. He looks out at the siege. They'll tear themselves apart soon enough. All I have to do is wait. And then what? You'll save them. He doesn't answer. He doesn't have to. By nightfall, the battle begins again. The clang of bronze on bronze. The screams, the songs, the dust rising thick enough to taste. Ares moves through it like a ghost, his presence enough to make men's hearts pound faster, even if they can't see him. When Diomedes charges, guided by Athena, it happens as legend says. The spear cuts through the chaos, and Ares takes the blow. The wound isn't deep, but the pain feels real. Too real. He stumbles back, shocked. For a moment, he forgets he's not fully divine anymore. Blood drips, dark and human. Athena's voice cuts through the din. Even you can bleed, brother. He laughs, grimacing. You always did enjoy the reminder. She tilts her head, her expression unreadable. Maybe one day you'll understand that strength isn't noise. He gestures to the battlefield. Tell them that. She doesn't reply. She never does when he's right. After the clash, the world seems quieter. Troy burns in the distance. The Greeks will claim victory soon, though no one here really wins. Ares walks among the ruins, the heat shimmering around him. He kneels beside a dying soldier, just a boy really. The youth clutches a broken spear, whispering, "Did we win?" Ares hesitates. Then he says softly, "Yes." The boy smiles and goes still. Ares sits there for a long time. No gods descend, no thunder cracks. Only wind. He whispers, "You did. For a moment. That's enough." When he finally stands, you can see the weight pressing on him. Every soul lost here is a prayer that will rise toward Olympus, and he knows the others will feed on it. War gives them purpose too. But for Ares, it's different now. He's starting to realize the thing mortals always knew. Winning costs more than losing ever did. By dawn, he vanishes from the field, leaving no trace but a smear of ash on a discarded helmet. In later years, poets will tell of Ares's rage, his wounds, his humiliation, but none will mention the part where he stayed behind to close the eyes of the fallen, because that doesn't make for good poetry, but it makes for a better god. You drift beside him through smoke and silence. Troy burns behind you, a smear of orange in the gray dawn, and Ares walks like a man who has finally seen the inside of his own reflection. The battlefield clings to him, the screams, the ashes, the memory of Athena's blade, but there's something else too. A stillness. He doesn't look back. Not once. The sea wind hits hard, salt and sorrow mingling on his skin. His divine spark flickers faintly with each gust, as if Olympus still tugs at what's left of him. But he keeps moving, down the narrow paths between blackened hills, through abandoned villages where dogs howl at nothing. You can tell he's trying to make sense of it all. The gods' games, men's hunger for glory, the cycle that keeps repeating like a song with no chorus. "Maybe I was never their god," he mutters. "Maybe I was just their excuse." That thought sits with you a long while. Historians still argue whether this was the point where Ares truly fell out of divine favor. Some say it was punishment, others claim it was freedom. Either way, the world stopped praying to him quite as loudly after Troy. The temples grew quieter, the sacrifices fewer. He feels it, the fading. You walk with him into a small fishing town on the Aegean coast. No one recognizes him, of course, just another soldier limping home after a war. The innkeeper gives him soup and a cot without asking questions. At dawn, he helps mend nets. His hands, once built for spears, learn the weight of rope and the patience of the tide. When one of the fishermen thanks him, Ares looks startled, as though no one's ever said the word to him before. He starts to understand something simple, that gratitude can heal wounds power never could. But then the dreams begin. Each night, he hears them, shouts, clashing swords, the echo of armor clanging in the dark. The dreams twist and repeat, always ending with Zeus's voice. "You were made for battle." He wakes drenched in sweat, fists clenched, heart pounding like war drums. The old hunger gnaws at him. One morning, he snaps a fishing spear in half, just to feel the splinter of power. The others flinch. He apologizes quietly and walks away. The villagers whisper that he's cursed. Maybe they're right. Days turn into weeks. Then one afternoon, a storm rolls in, a big one. Black clouds, raging surf, wind howling like a dying titan. Ares stands on the pier as waves crash around him, thunder roaring above. You almost expect Zeus to appear. Instead, the lightning strikes the water and a voice booms, not in the sky, but in his chest. "Why do you hide from what you are?" Ares grips the post beside him, shouting into the wind, "Because what I am destroys everything I touch." The sea answers with silence. Then, faintly, a second voice, softer, feminine, familiar. "Then learn to touch gently." He freezes. Athena. Always Athena. For all their rivalry, she never left him alone. Maybe that's her kindness, or her curse. When the storm passes, Ares sits in the sand for a long time, the foam hissing at his feet. He's exhausted, but something in his face has changed. You can't quite name it, but it looks suspiciously like surrender. He decides not to return to Olympus. Not yet. Instead, he travels inland, through fields of wheat and poppy where no one remembers his name. He watches shepherds fight over grazing land, children spar with sticks, old men brag about battles they never fought. War isn't gone. It never will be. It's just smaller now. Domestic. Personal. Even peace. He muses. is just war with better manners. He laughs quietly to himself, then shakes his head. Zeus would hate that one. He finds an old temple one day. His temple, overgrown and forgotten. The statue inside is chipped, its spear broken. Birds nest in his hollow eyes. Ares kneels. For a long time, he says nothing. Then he reaches up and wipes the dust from the idol's face. I wasn't better than you, he says softly, just noisier. He leaves an offering, a handful of poppy seeds, and walks away. As he disappears into the hills, you realize the god of war isn't dying. He's changing form, becoming something quieter, something the world still needs, but doesn't want to name aloud. Historians still debate what Ares represents: violence, courage, chaos, or simply the human urge to act despite fear. But watching him now, trudging through fields golden with evening light, you understand. He represents endurance. The fire still burns, yes, but it's banked now, patient and slow. By the time night falls, the sky above him is clear again. No lightning, no divine summons, just stars. He looks up, smirks, and mutters, "Still watching, old man?" The wind answers with a sigh that sounds almost like laughter. Weeks pass in silence. The god who once set nations ablaze now walks among olive groves and ruined shrines, unseen and unremembered. The land is scarred but green again, life creeping over the bones of Troy's aftermath. Goats graze where armies once clashed. Children skip stones across rivers that once ran red. The world, it seems, has learned to live without him. But Ares has not yet learned to live with himself. He follows the old war roads, the ones paved in both stone and memory. At every crossroads, he feels echoes, soldiers' prayers whispered to him centuries ago. The air still hums faintly with them. Grant me courage. Strike down my foes. Let me return home. Prayers that once fed his power now only haunt his sleep. One dusk, he finds a burned-out village, a relic of some newer feud, small, local, insignificant. Yet in the ashes sits a single woman, rocking a crying child, her eyes blank. She looks up when she senses him. No fear, no awe, just emptiness. Another god come to collect what's left, she says. Ares kneels. No, I've taken enough. She doesn't know who he is, but her laugh cuts through him like a blade. Then you're the first. He offers her bread from his satchel, coarse, mortal bread. The gesture is small, but her trembling hands accept it. When the child stops crying, Ares feels something unfamiliar swell in his chest. It isn't pride or pity. It's responsibility. When they sleep that night by the ruined hearth, Ares dreams again, but not of battle. This time, he dreams of wheat bending in wind, of quiet days, of men laying down swords not because they were defeated, but because they'd finally had enough. He wakes before dawn, staring into the embers. Is that peace, he murmurs, or just exhaustion wearing a crown? No answer, but the sky is beginning to glow with the pale edge of sunrise, the same light that once glittered off his spear. He takes it as a sign. For months he wanders, helping rebuild what was broken, bridges, walls, men's hearts. He teaches them how to fight only when needed, how to protect rather than conquer. Word spreads of a strange traveler, with eyes like molten bronze and scars like lightning strikes, who speaks of wars as if he buried them with his own hands. They call him the Red Mason. He doesn't correct them. Sometimes, when disputes rise, he still feels the pulse of his old power surge through him, the intoxicating rhythm of command, of conflict. But instead of yielding to it, he listens. He lets others speak. It's harder than any battle he ever fought. And slowly, mortals begin to change too. Villages forge pacts instead of weapons. Neighbors share harvests rather than burn them. Ares feels something he never knew possible. His domain shifting from war's chaos to discipline, from rage to resilience. His strength no longer comes from the clash of blades, but from the endurance of those who choose to rebuild. It's then he realizes, war never ends, but it can be tamed. One evening, he returns to the sea, the same shore where he once shouted into the storm. The waves are calm now, the air thick with salt and memory. A small boat bobs in the shallows, its hull carved with Athena's owl. He almost laughs. You always send signs, don't you? He mutters. From somewhere far above, or perhaps from within, he feels her presence. Cool, distant, but not unkind. Even the storm needs a horizon, she says. He hesitates. And if I sail beyond it? Then perhaps you'll finally learn who you are without your sword. He steps into the boat. For 3 days, he rows beneath endless sky, stars wheeling like silent witnesses. No thunder, no omens, just the rhythmic creak of wood and oar. His reflection in the water is no longer godlike, no armor, no flame. Just a man with tired eyes and a faint smile. When land finally appears, it's nothing divine, just a stretch of green hills and a temple under construction. Mortals are raising its walls, stone by stone, without priests or offerings. He approaches, curious. What is this place? He asks a mason. A school, the man says, wiping his brow. For teaching sons of soldiers how not to die like their fathers. Ares nods, a flicker of pride, or perhaps sorrow, crossing his face. A noble cause. The mason shrugs. Some say a god guides us, one who once loved battle but grew weary of it. Ares looks up at the unfinished pediment. The carvings depict not a warrior, but a torch, passed from one hand to another. He smiles faintly. He sounds like a fool. Maybe, the mason says, but a necessary one. That night, when the fires burn low and the moon climbs high, Ares sits alone beside the sea again. He feels the pulse of the world, its wars, its peace, its endless struggle, and for the first time, he doesn't wish to control it. He just listens. The sound is not silence, but harmony. You stand beside him one last time. His armor, once crimson with fury, now glows faintly gold in the starlight. He turns to you and says, quietly, "Tell them I wasn't defeated. I just finally laid down my spear." And with that, he walks into the horizon, where sea and sky meet in eternal balance. The god of war is gone, but the spirit of endurance, of fighting to live, not to conquer, remains. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbles softly, not in anger, in remembrance. Centuries drift by like dust in a sunbeam. The name Ares fades from the prayers of soldiers and the songs of poets. Empires rise and crumble, new gods take the stage, and the old myths begin to soften at their edges. Stories told not to inspire terror, but to soothe restless minds before sleep. You wander through time alongside the whisper of his legacy, and it feels like walking through fog. The world still remembers war, of course, it always does, but Ares himself becomes more symbol than deity, a faint ember of what once was a roaring blaze. In the quiet libraries of Athens, you watch scholars copy stories onto parchment. They write of heroes and monsters, but when Ares appears, he's less a god and more a moral lesson, a cautionary tale. Rage blinds. One scribe murmurs as he sharpens his quill. Even gods can forget their purpose. You can almost hear Ares chuckle somewhere in the ether, amused by how humans have tamed his image into something teachable. Historians still argue whether Ares ever had real worshippers outside of Sparta. Some say his cults vanished because people feared him too deeply to love him. Others claim he was never meant to be adored, only acknowledged, like the inevitability of storms. Either way, his temples crumble faster than the others. Even the stone seems tired of holding his weight. Yet there are places where his name lingers, hidden sanctuaries where old veterans gather to pour wine on the ground before battle, just in case. Forest clearings where a red bird calls 3 times, and farmers murmur. Ares still listens. Folklore keeps him alive where theology cannot. You walk through one such village in the shadow of a forgotten mountain. The locals tell a story of the rusted stranger, a wanderer who visits fields after blood has been spilled. He cleans the soil, sets the swords upright, and disappears by dawn. He doesn't take sides. An old woman tells you, stirring her stew. He just makes sure we remember what war costs. It's not worship exactly. It's respect, wary, bittersweet, but real. That's how gods survive when their temples fall. In memory, in metaphor, in the tiny human rituals no one even realizes are offerings. There's another legend, whispered among sailors. When a great storm breaks and lightning splits the sky, They say the god of war is fighting himself again, his fury against his regret. But if the thunder fades gently instead of shattering the night, it means he's winning. It means peace, however temporary, has returned. You can't help but smile at that. The mortals may have forgotten his face, but not his rhythm. Over time, Ares becomes something softer. The poets reshape him into the embodiment of passion, vitality, the will to survive. The god of war becomes the god of persistence. His old violence melts into metaphor. Lovers invoke his name not for conquest, but for courage. Painters depict him sleeping beside Aphrodite, the spear resting harmlessly at their feet. Even statues of him lose their snarl. His eyes no longer rage, they dream. The old philosophers would probably laugh. Some already did. Historians still debate whether Ares was meant to personify external war or the inner battle every human faces, the struggle between impulse and restraint, fear and faith. Maybe he was both. Maybe that's why he still lingers, even now. You wander through a modern museum one day. Bright white walls, glass cases, everything sterile and quiet. In one corner stands a cracked marble statue, labeled simply Ares, Roman copy of Greek original, 2nd century CE. No offerings, no incense, just tourists snapping pictures. Yet as you stare at it, you swear his eyes almost move. There's a faint gleam, like the echo of a fire that refuses to die. A little boy walks up beside you, holding his mother's hand. "Mom," he whispers, "was he the bad guy?" She smiles faintly. "Not bad, honey. Just angry. But even gods can learn." And for a brief second, it feels as if the statue exhales. A release of centuries. The marble seems lighter. You realize then that this is immortality in its quietest form. Not worship, not fear, but understanding. The world no longer needs Ares to swing his sword. It carries him instead as a reminder that rage, too, can evolve. Later that evening, you walk through the city's crowded streets. Neon lights flash, engines roar, arguments spark and dissolve like lightning. The human world still hums with conflict, but beneath it, you sense something steadier. The pulse of endurance. The stubborn heartbeat of a species that refuses to stay broken. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear him walking beside you. No armor, no blood, just quiet footsteps, keeping time with yours. A breeze brushes your cheek, warm, metallic, like the scent before a storm. You smile. He's still here, just in a different form. The god of war has become the ghost of resilience. You wait beneath a different sky. No longer Greek, but Roman. The air hums with discipline and marble ambition. Roads slice across the continent like veins of order. Legions march with synchronized thunder. And everywhere, banners shimmer in red and gold. Ares, the old, wild god, doesn't exist here. At least not by that name. In his place stands Mars. It's strange watching him reborn. He's taller now, calmer somehow. His armor gleams, not with blood but with polish. His expression isn't fury, it's focus. The Romans took the unpredictable flame of Ares and forged it into something steady, civic, almost noble. You stroll beside him through the forum, listening to the clang of hammers and the shouts of merchants. Every statue of Mars seems more controlled than the last. None of that manic Greek energy. None of the chaos that once made Olympus tremble. Here, Mars isn't the destroyer, he's the protector. Historians still argue whether the Romans misunderstood Ares or improved him. Some claim they simply rebranded the same god for better public relations. Others insist Mars always existed independently, a distinctly Roman vision of war, organized, justified, wrapped in patriotism. Either way, you can't help but notice the irony. The same god who once represented reckless slaughter now presides over parades, oaths, and harvest festivals. He even shares a temple with his sons, Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror, though now they're kept on a leash, metaphorically speaking. In early Rome, Mars isn't just about battle. He's a father figure, a guardian of fields. Farmers pray to him for fertile soil, not fallen enemies. There's even a festival, the Aquaria, where horses race to honor him. The people cheer, throw flowers, sing songs. It's a far cry from the guttural chants that once rose over Spartan altars. You walk among them, half expecting Ares to roll his eyes. But Mars stands proud, basking in the adoration. "They've tamed me," he says, almost amused. "Turned my blade into a plow." "Does it bother you?" you ask. He smiles faintly. "No. Maybe it's time I learned another kind of war." Still, the old instincts linger. When Rome marches on its neighbors, Mars walks ahead of the legions, invisible but palpable. His presence vibrates in every drumbeat, every sword unsheathed. But this isn't Ares' chaos, it's choreography. A disciplined storm. Roman generals build temples to him before campaigns and dedicate spoils upon return. He becomes Mars Ultor, Mars the Avenger, patron of righteous victory. The Senate invokes his name before decreeing war, as though seeking divine permission. Imagine that, mortals asking a god's consent before spilling blood. Ares would have laughed himself hoarse. But Mars doesn't laugh. He nods solemnly, as if aware that this restraint, however ceremonial, marks progress. You stand with him on the Capitoline Hill one evening, overlooking the flickering city. "You've changed," you say. "I've adapted," he corrects. "They needed order more than chaos, and I needed purpose." It's an interesting trade. Ares, who once raged against Olympus's mockery, now thrives on human reverence. Yet beneath the calm exterior, you sense something deeper, a quiet ache. The Romans may honor him, but they don't know him. They celebrate his symbol, not his soul. That's the price of evolution, immortality through misunderstanding. A quirky historian later notes that Roman soldiers would carry small effigies of Mars into battle. Before they advanced, they'd strike the ground with spears beside his statue and shout, "Mars Vigila, Mars awaken." It's both reverent and ironic, calling a god of war to wake, as if he ever slept. Some modern scholars believe the ritual was psychological conditioning. Others whisper it was genuine devotion, that Mars still walked among them, unseen but very much awake. One night, after a long campaign, you find him at the edge of a battlefield. The legions have triumphed, and the air smells of iron and victory. He sits alone, watching the smoke drift. "Do you miss Greece?" you ask. He doesn't answer right away. The wind carries distant cries of revelers from the city. Finally, he says, "Sometimes. But Greece wanted fury. Rome wants duty. And maybe both were right." You wonder if that's the most human thing a god has ever said. Centuries later, when emperors rise and declare themselves divine, they always include Mars among their patrons. He becomes the face of the empire's glory, the father of Romulus, the founder of Rome itself. His myth becomes state propaganda, his image stamped on coins, his name carved into triumphal arches. Ares, once the lonely outcast of Olympus, has finally found a home. But it's one built on the very thing he once despised, control. And yet, you can't help feeling proud of him. He's not the storm anymore. He's the weathered sky that holds it. Still, deep inside, you sense the ember of Ares flickering. Every empire carries its own downfall, after all. And when Rome begins to crack, you can almost hear his old laughter echoing from beneath the marble, soft, knowing, inevitable. Mars has become legend. Ares has become memory. But both still burn in the human pulse whenever courage rises, whenever anger turns to action, whenever someone chooses to fight, not for conquest, but for survival. You stand beside him one last time as dawn spills across the 7 hills. The legions sleep. The city hums. Mars turns to you, his voice low and almost kind. "The war never ends," he says. "It just changes shape." You nod, feeling the truth of it ripple through history. And somewhere, beneath the layers of time and translation, Ares smiles in his sleep. You find yourself seated on a stone bench in the shade of a colonnade. The empire is long gone now, its marble cracked, its glory thinned to dust. But the ideas that lived inside it still breathe. Scholars gather around the ruins, parchments fluttering in the wind, debating, as philosophers always do, what it all meant. Ares, or Mars, depending on who's speaking, isn't worshipped anymore. He's analyzed, dissected, footnoted, argued over in candlelight. You lean back, listening to the hum of centuries collapsing into thought. Was he chaos or courage? One scholar asks, adjusting his cloak. Both, another replies, and that's why no one ever liked him. The conversation ripples across generations. Stoics, Cynics, Neoplatonists, each takes a turn. You can almost see their words floating like dust motes in sunlight, each one a spark trying to make sense of an ancient fire. Historians still argue whether Ares represented war itself or the instinct behind it. Some say he was humanity's shadow, the primal urge to fight, to assert, to survive. Others insist he was simply an allegory for passion, neither good nor evil, just raw, untamed energy. You smile to yourself. Even gods become homework eventually. In Athens, a philosopher named Chrysippus once wrote that every god is a metaphor for a human virtue or a human failure. Ares, he claimed, is the spark that forces men to move. But centuries later, a Christian scribe counters. He is the devil's ancestor, rage without reason. Both are wrong, of course, but it's endearing to watch mortals wrestle with ideas that once wore armor. One particularly eccentric thinker in the early Renaissance insists Ares never existed at all, that he was a psychological projection of mankind's fear of mortality. He is our reflection in the sword, he writes. The claim earns him ridicule, but also admiration. Philosophers adore a paradox almost as much as they hate agreeing with each other. You walk through a university courtyard in Alexandria, where scrolls crackle with arguments. A lecturer gestures wildly, proclaiming that Ares was not a villain, but a warning, a divine reminder of what happens when emotion outruns wisdom. He is not evil, she says, only unfinished. The students scribble furiously, though half of them are thinking about lunch. Still, the idea sticks. The notion of Ares as incomplete becomes strangely comforting, proof that even gods are works in progress. A quirky tidbit drifts through time. In one obscure medieval manuscript, a monk described seeing Ares in a dream, not in his warlike form, but sitting quietly by a river, sharpening a plow instead of a sword. The monk took it as a sign that peace and war are just two faces of the same divine truth. The church never canonized the vision, but it spread among mystics like wildfire. And so, the god of war slowly becomes the philosopher's muse. His story, stripped of thunder and blood, now reads like a study of the human condition. You sit with a group of modern scholars centuries later. They sip espresso instead of wine, surrounded by laptops and translation apps instead of scrolls. But the conversation hasn't changed much. Ares is toxic masculinity, one says. Ares is suppressed trauma, another argues. No, a third interjects. Ares is the embodiment of perseverance. Anger harnessed becomes strength. They debate into the night, the air thick with theory. And though they don't realize it, Ares himself is listening, somewhere between the words, in the pulse of their conviction. You feel it too. The same energy that once fueled legions now fuels ideas. The battlefield has moved from plains of dust to pages of ink. But the war, the human struggle to understand itself, remains. At one point, a young student asks softly, "Do you think he was ever happy?" The room goes silent. No one answers. You glance toward the window, where rain begins to fall. Each drop gleams like molten bronze. Maybe, you whisper, when someone finally stopped fighting him. Because here's the secret the philosophers never quite catch. Ares was never the god of destruction. He was the god of motion, of what happens when you refuse to stand still. Without him, nothing would ever begin. So they keep writing, arguing, reframing. The old myths are read as therapy, the gods as metaphors for neurons and instincts. Ares becomes an early symbol for the human amygdala. Someone jokes. The class laughs, but deep down, they feel the resonance. He's no longer prayed to, but he's still consulted. Every time someone picks up a pen instead of a weapon, or stands their ground instead of lashing out, Ares wins a quiet victory. And though philosophers will forever debate whether he symbolizes chaos, courage, or something in between, you know the truth. He's all of it. He always was. You close your eyes, listening to the echo of their discussion fade into the hum of modern life. Cars, voices, rain, all small, rhythmic wars of their own. And in that symphony of motion, somewhere, Ares smiles. The centuries blur, like brushstrokes smeared by time. The temples are gone now, swallowed by moss and highways, but the spirit of Ares still hums beneath the modern world. You can feel him in the metallic pulse of cities, in the restless tapping of fingers on desks, in every sigh that means, I can't take this anymore, but I will anyway. You step into the noise of the present day. Headlights streak like comets. Sirens wail in the distance, rhythmic and lonely. Screens flicker with images of conflict, new uniforms, new flags, the same old ache. Humanity has traded bronze for steel, and spears for drones, but the heartbeat of war still drums beneath everything. Ares never died. He just changed playlists. You wander through a crowded subway car. No one looks up, but everyone carries their own little battle, deadlines, heartbreaks, survival. You can almost see the invisible armor around them, confidence stitched over fear, humor masking exhaustion. Ares walks among them, unseen but deeply felt, whispering not fight, but endure. Historians still argue whether he belongs here. Some call him obsolete, an ancient ghost in a rational world. Others, more quietly, see him in every protest, every rally, every clenched fist raised not to destroy, but to demand dignity. They say Ares has become the god of defiance. And maybe that's true. You follow him into the alleys of modern history, through the world wars, the revolutions, the resistance songs sung in cellars. He's there each time a people refuse to be erased. A quirky fact emerges. During the Second World War, some soldiers carried tiny iron pendants shaped like ancient Greek helmets, believing they would protect them. Archaeologists later found hundreds buried with their owners. No inscriptions, no prayers, just the silent mark of a forgotten god, still doing his job. You step into a museum of modern art. The walls are loud with color and anguish, canvases slashed with red, sculptures twisted like screams. The curator says the exhibition explores the persistence of conflict in the human psyche. You know it. You know who's behind it. Ares stands in one corner, disguised as a man in a leather jacket, hands in his pockets, studying a painting of a single black spear dissolving into birds. Do you like it? You ask. He tilts his head. They almost get it. War isn't just blood. It's motion, creation through destruction. You smile. Still philosophical, I see. He smirks. Philosophers stole it from me first. He walks out before you can respond, vanishing into the hum of the street. The city outside feels like his new Olympus, chaotic, flawed, alive. Every honk, every argument, every act of kindness forged from exhaustion, all of it his kingdom. Ares no longer rules through fear or worship. He's part of the human bloodstream now, embedded deep. The spark that says keep going even when everything burns. At a concert that night, the air shakes with electric guitars and red light. The crowd roars, thousands of voices moving as one, the kind of unity that used to happen only in battlefields or temples. The lyrics scream about resistance, rage, and freedom. Ares stands beside you again, grinning. They're louder than Sparta ever was, he says over the noise. Different kind of war, you reply. He laughs softly. All wars are the same. The brave just keep finding new instruments. Historians still debate whether mythology influences culture or merely reflects it. But you know better. Ares never stopped influencing anything. He just traded swords for symbols. You see him in sports arenas, every athlete sweating for glory. You see him in courtroom battles, in political campaigns, in the fiery speeches of those who stand against oppression. Whenever someone refuses to surrender, even to despair, he's there, invisible but undeniable. And not all his forms are violent. Some are quiet, almost tender. The nurse working through another endless night. The firefighter walking into smoke. The parent shielding their child from bad news with a steady voice. These are the new warriors of Ares, though none of them would ever think of it that way. You can feel his pride in them, a fierce, humble pride. They fight not for conquest, but for endurance, for each other. He doesn't crave temples anymore. He finds them in stadium lights, in crowded streets, in the glow of a phone held by someone choosing to stay alive one more day. The scholars would call this transformation symbolic. The poets might call it redemption. Aries just calls it growing up. A quirky modern myth even circulates online. A viral thread claiming that if you stand in front of a mirror during a thunderstorm and whisper, "I am not afraid of tomorrow," you'll hear a faint metallic echo behind your reflection, like armor shifting. The post insists it's not superstition, just reassurance from the oldest fighter. Thousands comment that they tried it and felt calm afterward. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. As night deepens, you walk through the city with Aries one last time. He's quieter now, older in presence, but lighter in step. "I thought gods faded when people stopped believing," you say. He shakes his head. "We don't fade. We just change addresses." He looks at the skyline, its towers glowing like modern spears, and adds, "They don't pray to me anymore, but they still carry me. Every time they refuse to quit, that's enough." And with that, he vanishes into the crowd. No thunder, no divine fanfare. Just another soul walking home beneath the hum of streetlights and the quiet, eternal rhythm of endurance. You watch until he's gone, and for a moment, you swear the city's heartbeat slows, as if bowing in respect. Centuries later, centuries always later, you find yourself back where it began. Not in Sparta, not in any temple, but in the dust between worlds, that half-place where myths go when people stop naming them aloud. It feels like dawn, though there is no sun. Aries sits on a fractured marble throne, worn down by time and silence. Around him, the remnants of forgotten gods flicker like dying constellations. Artemis chasing a ghost deer, Hermes pacing restlessly, Athena writing strategies in light that fade as soon as they're written. Aries looks up when you arrive. He's not in armor this time. He's barefoot, dressed in simple linen, his hair tied back like a soldier off duty. There's a strange peace about him, the kind that comes not from victory, but from finally understanding the cost. "So," you say softly, "is this the end of war?" He studies you, eyes the color of storm clouds before rain. "No," he says, "but it's the beginning of remembering what it was for." The air shimmers. From the shadows rise images, not paintings, not memories, but living echoes. Warriors embracing after battle, cities rebuilt from ashes, children playing in streets where soldiers once marched. Each image burns briefly, then dissolves into light, as if history itself is breathing forgiveness. Aries gestures toward them. "That's my true work now. Not the clash, but the aftermath, the silence after the shout." He stands and walks among the flickering visions. As he moves, his footsteps spark tiny flames that hover before fading, each one a moment of courage from some forgotten soul. "You always thought I was blood and rage," he says. "But rage was just the doorway. What came after was the lesson." You follow him, feeling the weight of centuries behind every word. "And what lesson is that?" "That to fight," he says, "is not to destroy. It's to protect what must never be lost. Hope, memory, each other." His voice trembles slightly, not with weakness, but with the unbearable honesty of one who has seen everything burn. You realize that Aries has not only evolved, he has been forgiven by time itself. No longer the god of conquest, but the keeper of resilience. A wind rises, scattering the marble dust. Through it, you hear faint echoes of every era, battle cries, lullabies, whispered promises made in trenches and hospital corridors. It all blends into one vast sound, the endless heartbeat of existence. Aries lifts his hand, and the noise softens into music, a slow, low rhythm like the pulse of the earth. "That," he says, "is what I guard now." You stand together in the glow of that rhythm. The universe feels alive again, not with conflict, but with endurance. Far away, a child somewhere in the modern world clutches a toy soldier before bedtime. A muralist paints a red flame on a gray wall. A teacher recites the Iliad to a room of sleepy students, and one of them, unknowingly, feels the stir of something ancient and defiant. Aries smiles faintly. "We never truly vanish," he says. "We just become the stories people need." He turns to you, his expression both weary and kind. "And now you've seen enough. Go. Tell them what war was. Tell them what it became. Tell them that even gods can learn mercy." The air thickens with gold light. The other forgotten deities pause in their fading routines to watch as Ares' form begins to dissolve into flame. It's not destruction, it's transformation. His body becomes a constellation of sparks, drifting upward like embers carried on a cosmic wind. You reach out instinctively, but he's already everywhere. His voice carried on the glow, the last whisper of an ancient truth. Every act of courage, every breath taken after despair, that's me. I'm not the roar anymore. I'm the echo that keeps it alive. The throne crumbles to dust. The light swells, filling every corner of the void, until it becomes impossible to tell where God ends and universe begins. And then quiet. Just a single ember remains, suspended before you. You cup your hands, and it drifts into your palms, warm and pulsing like a heartbeat. It flickers once, twice, then sinks into your skin. For a moment, everything feels unbearably human, fragile, fierce, unfinished. You look up. The void has turned to dawn. The first light of a new world rises over the horizon of myth, illuminating the ruins of what was and the infinite possibilities of what could be. Somewhere, in that glow, you think you hear laughter. Low, rough, familiar. Maybe Ares. Maybe not. But as you walk toward the light, you carry his ember inside you. And you understand, finally, what all his wars were for. Not dominance, not pride, but the persistence of life itself. The story ends not in blood, but in breath. And that breath, eternal and defiant, is the sound of humanity learning to stand again.